Recording right now, I think. Yes. All right. So welcome everyone to this webinar on US Foundation fundraising, a topic that we love to talk about, and we're very happy that all of you took the time to learn more about this great way of doing fundraising. Before I and my colleague Emilie are going to introduce ourselves, just so you know what you're going to do today. In the next 45 minutes, we are going to tell you about these three things that you see on the screen. So we're going to give you a quick overview about the US Foundation landscape. We're going to help you to find and secure leads, and with leads we mean the US foundations. So how to find them and how to get them excited about the projects that you do. And we will conclude with some practical tips that might help you to become successful in US Foundation fundraising. We will take some 45 minutes for this, as you saw in the invitation. Afterwards, Emilie and I are still here to discuss with you any topic that you would like to discuss, or any question that you have. In the meanwhile, if you have a question or comments or anything you would like to share, you can use the chat function for that, or raise your hand, and we will make sure that your point is being addressed today, or if not possible, afterwards, one-on-one. Good. So this is what you can expect today. Quick introduction about ourselves. Emilie, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Han. My name is Emilie. I am a senior consultant with HVFC USA, so the US-based part of HVFC. And as you can tell a little bit from my accent, I'm Dutch. I've been living in the United States in Washington, D.C. for the past 13 years. I've worked for 8 years at the World Bank at a grant-making program there. And since 2019, I've been with HVFC. And it's been a very interesting experience to assist organizations from all around the world in accessing institutional funding from various markets in Europe, in the United States, and elsewhere.
Excellent. Thanks, Emilie. Well, my name is Han Valk. I'm the founder of HVFC. I'm a fundraiser by profession. I've worked now for 20 years in institutional and international fundraising. I've been head of fundraising for 3 different INGOs, and 8 years ago, I set up HVFC. It used to stand for Han Valk Fundraising Consultancy, in case you wonder what it stands for. Well, we do 3 kinds of things. We help organizations worldwide to diversify their funding. So we help them to seek new opportunities, engage with funders, develop proposals, do grant management, the whole cycle of fundraising. We also help organizations in what we call powering the program. So this is the impact component of our work. We help organizations to spend their money better, you could say. So based on evidence, we try to see what kind of interventions are you doing and how can you spend your money better. And we've added that to our portfolio of services simply because donors are keep on asking more and more about evidence about your work. Not only do they want to fund you, and they might give you 100,000 or 1 million or 10 million euros, they also want to see what if we would give that amount of money to someone else. Where do we get the best value for money? And that's why we help organizations in assessing that. Third part of our work is what we call boosting of capacity. So we help organizations with training and training and coaching and skills development. And if that's not enough and you have a gap in your team, we help organizations with filling that gap by our recruitment services. Well, that's a bit about what we do. I mentioned already that we do that globally, or internationally at least. We do that in some 25 countries at the moment, with 2 offices, one in the US and one in the Netherlands. We have a hub with 3 consultants in Denmark, with someone in Sweden, someone in Bangladesh, someone in Singapore. And since this month, you're the first ones that know this. We haven't announced it yet, but we're also now in the UK. So that will be shared with the broader public soon. That's a little bit about us. But we are also very curious about who you are. So, well, we don't have a time for a full round of introductions. but I have three simple questions. You see them now in your screen popping up. So the first question, we would like to know where you're from. Well, I see some faces I know, so I know where they are from, but I'm very curious where you're from. You work for organizations, most likely, so I'm curious about the size. So what kind of sizes are in this group? And last but not least, some of you are probably already experienced in US foundation fundraising. So I'm curious to hear how successful you already are. So what size of your budget is coming from US foundations? So I think you see it on the screen, and you can fill in these three questions. We'll give you 1 or 2 minutes, and then I will close the poll. I don't see any answers coming in yet, but you see it, right? Yeah, good. All right. Let's see where we are. I just close it, and then hopefully we have some results, but it doesn't look they came through. You see any results? Oh, you see them? I don't. So what kind of results do you see? Who wants to tell me?
I see a few results. So we had about 17 responses, and we got 1 person from Africa, 12 from Europe, 1 from South America, and 3 from North America. And then on the question of what is the annual budget of your organization, I think I would say the majority, doing a really quick analysis here, most of them are below $25 million per year, but there are maybe a couple who are above 25 million per year. And then on the last question of what percentage of your annual budget is coming from US foundations already, we had 17 responses, and all of them say that basically less than 10% is coming from US foundations already, including 5 people who say that no funds are coming from US foundations yet. Okay, well, plenty of opportunities then still to find. So excellent. So for the next half hour or so, we will give you a good overview of the US foundation market. And we do that around the questions that are being asked to us most often. So we hope and expect that those are also questions that you have, and that's maybe the reason that you participate. Like I said earlier, if you have additional questions, other questions, or follow-up questions, please either leave them in the chat or stay after 45 minutes with in this call, and Emilie and I are here to answer these questions for you. Good. So first thing that we would like to share with you is an overview of the US foundation market. Emilie. Yes, and I guess this is partly why all of you signed up. So to tell you a little bit about the US foundations markets, here's an overview. So this data comes from the Giving USA 2022 report. It covers data from 2021. And as you can see, the US foundations market is about $90 billion. It was in that year, which was an increase over the previous year of 3.4%. And what you don't see here is that this pie, this little pie piece that you see, is part of a bigger pie of US giving, which includes giving by individuals, corporations, and bequests. That's what the data look like. And that entire pie is around $484 billion. And so this $90 billion market of US foundations is a subset of that entire giving market in the United States. This $90 billion number is giving that came from US foundations in 2021, and it includes grants given by independent, community, and operating foundations. So 3 different types. Interestingly, Han, I think we can move to the next slide. The U.S. Foundation segment of American Giving keeps growing. Actually, not so much on this slide yet, but over the past 40 years, the segment has grown. So actually pertaining to the previous slide, the segment of total American giving that is coming from U.S. foundations has grown by 3 times, from 6% to the 19% of American giving that you just saw. And ultimately, it keeps on growing. And so as you can see in this slide, what do U.S. donors fund? There are many different categories, including religion, education, human development, and several other topics. One topic that U.S. donors fund and that that is being measured is giving to international affairs, which includes international organizations like yours. And that giving has, as you can see, steadily grown over the years in total numbers to about 27 billion in 2021. So back to the picture of what do the US foundations like to fund? So that's what we have here. This is data just about what foundations fund. And this chart is provided by Candid. As you can see at the top of the list, where the US foundations are directing their funds the most is education at about 26%. Next up is health issues, that's at 23%, and community and economic development at 13%, as well as human services, likewise at 13%. And lastly, a topic is arts and culture at 9%. So that gives you an idea of what kind of issues US foundations like to fund. Next, an idea on what are the support strategies that they use to make those funds available to their grantees. It includes, most of it is program development. Next up is general support for organizations. Excuse me. Then research and evaluation is a topic that they do also regularly fund, as well as policy advocacy and systems reform, and capacity building and technical assistance is, well, on this chart, the least funded. But if you look at, again, the overall number, it's still a considerable amount, of course. Lastly, the populations that are typically served by the funding from US foundations includes mostly economically disadvantaged people, then a separate category of children and youth, then ethnic and racial groups is a somewhat smaller number than women and girls, and religious groups. Overall, 23% of grant dollars from US funders were awarded for international purpose. So again, these numbers can differ a little bit depending on what data you look at, but this is about the ballpark number.
Yeah. So looking at this group of participants today, and I think I've a relative good understanding of who's here, but it seems like there are plenty of opportunities for most of you. And well, I'm Dutch, and what I always find interesting is just looking at how many Dutch organizations are already funded by American foundations, and the number is higher than 300. So there are 300 organizations based in the Netherlands that receive funding from US foundations. So that's quite a lot, and the range goes from really small, some only get like $1,000 or so, up to millions and millions and millions. So and anything in between. So it is a big pie, and as you can see, for many of the activities that you do, including general support, I find that personally very interesting. 20% of the funding is for general support. That's super interesting. Yeah. Shall I continue, Emilie?
Yes, please. And so on this slide, you'll see just a very few of the thousands of US foundations, some of which you will already have heard of, like Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, perhaps the Wallace Global Fund, Wellspring, even Seagull is pretty well known, but also smaller or lesser known organizations such as Gruber Family Foundation, just to pick a name. They're actually not small, and so the grant sizes they'll offer can differentiate from maybe $500 to well over $10,000 or even over $100,000. In the case of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, it goes well into the millions.
Yeah.
Just to
in
give
total,
you
there are like
an idea.
100,000 foundations. So it's yeah, we just picked 5 to name drop. Yeah.
Indeed. Okay, so moving on to the next topic that you'll be interested in, which is how to actually find US foundations that are relevant to you as an organization. So in the next few slides, I have a couple of, I'm going to outline a couple of steps, which you can use to really identify US foundations that are relevant to you. So this first step, and this is clearly part of a broader set of steps you may want to do, but here I'm just going to highlight a few. First step is to set your search criteria based on your fundraising goal. So hopefully you have a fundraising goal in mind for your organization, which will touch on how much funding you're searching for, to do what, and lastly, why. Then, starting from that fundraising goal, with that in mind, you'll need to define 3 criteria for your search. The first criterion being your theme. And here you'll need to be fairly specific. Just saying education or environmental awareness is not enough. You'll have to spell out your theme a little bit more in detail, such as to say, in education, we develop new curriculums for schools, for example, or we build new schools, or we make certain groups of people in certain areas more aware of environmental issues. So just some examples of how your theme should be defined, because that's going to help you in your search for donors, because they will just simply put the issues that they fund a certain way, and so you need to be as sort of broadly set up in order to find those donors that are working on issues that you also work on. Second criterion is to define your geography of operation. This is probably already very clear to you. Where will you work with the money you might obtain? And geography can mean a country or a broader world region, or even a sub-region within a country. So you have to have that clear. Last criterion you'll want to define is your desired grant size. That basically depends on how big of a grant you need in order to complete the work you're trying to do. And then also consider what is the amount that your organization is actually able to handle. How you cannot go from being a $500,000 per year organization to one that handles 20 million per year. That is simply unrealistic. So try to be realistic here.
Yeah. And the last one sounds obvious, but what we see often is that the organizations, if often they have no real specific grant size in mind, maybe a minimum, but not so much a maximum. And it means that the list of opportunities is way too big, and you're wasting your time in dealing with foundations that you cannot even handle. You can never be successful in applying, or even if you're successful, it's going to take so much of your energy that it's not a sustainable model. So it's also good to not only think about the minimum size of grants that you're looking for, but also a maximum, and that it helps you to prioritize.
Yes, thank you, Han. So for the next step on how to find US foundations that are relevant to you, is you're going to start scanning your landscape for donor names, starting in 3 specific places. And this is an approach we like to recommend to the organizations that we work with. So the first pool or place of donor names you might start from is your existing donors. They are already on your side and you know them probably relatively well. So start there. Second is your past donors. Some donors may have funded you in the past, large or small amounts. It doesn't matter. Look at them again in order to identify new opportunities with those donors. Third is your competitors or your partners' donors. And this is where we recommend looking at your competitors. Where you might find the donors that fund them is either in their annual report. Most organizations list their donors there. If not, on their website, you'll usually find it there. And at this point, I'd love to ask a question. Do any of you have places where you tend to look for donor names in the United States? Would anyone like to share how you do this? And you can maybe raise your hand or indeed put it in the chat. That's all good.
Hans is sharing the foundation directory. We will come back to that one in a bit. So very, very good one, Hans. Thanks.
Does anyone else have a suggestion?
Transfer NGOs, yes.
Mm-hmm.
There are good databases out there. That's something that is, and we will come back to that in a bit as well, but one of the things where the US is different to for example, Europe, is that in the US there is a lot of transparency. So all the financial and funding data of the foundations is available. So there are good databases, and you, through a good Google search, you can find something as well. But we recommend databases, and we were going to show you one in a bit. But all the data is there. And if you compare that, for example, with Europe, the UK or the Netherlands or Belgium, there's a lot less data available about foundations. No one has a complete overview. And this is something you can really use in the US. And we'll show you in a bit how you can use it. So yeah. So we get some good ideas, and new ideas are popping up still. So keep on typing them down, because everyone can see it and it might inspire the others. The Foundation Center was mentioned.
Yes. So step 3, after you've collected a list of names of donors that might be relevant to your organization, you need to search for information about those donors in order to really verify that they are truly relevant for you. Where can you find that information? Already mentioned. The Foundation Center Online is a rich source. Funds for NGOs. All the other suggestions in the chats are all very, very good. I would not forget, ultimately, when you are doing your mapping, is to look at the Foundation's websites. They are a treasure trove of information. And don't forget, as you're doing this process, don't forget to tap into your colleagues' wisdom and knowledge about the different foundations to put that in your mapping. Now, something I want to remind you is to, as you're doing this mapping, it's important to get organized. So firstly, you start from your list of donor names. You list your criteria that you've already defined in a spreadsheet, for example, or a document. And then with your criteria on one hand and the donor names on the other hand, you start searching for information and recording that in your spreadsheet, so that you have information pertaining to every criterion on each donor. And then it's important to remain organized. So here is where you will want to start ranking, prioritizing some of those donors, maybe color code them, so that ultimately we don't recommend spending too much time on a donor and on collecting information. You just want to collect a couple of key data points, and if you get a sense that it's not a very amazing match, then just simply move on to the next one. And lastly, very important is to actually do your donor mapping regularly. Information and strategies and goals of foundations do change, as you all know. So do revisit those foundations every now and then. You might find additional names. You might find that donors that are already on your list have, changed track, and they are no longer relevant to you. So keep doing your mapping exercise. Now I'll hand over to Han to tell you a little bit about what you need to do after you've done your light mapping, which is to get on the radar of those foundations.
Thank you, Emilie. Yeah, so what often happens is you do such a donor mapping, you will find plenty of leads, and you need to bring that down to fewer opportunities. And if we do a quick search for our clients, we often end up with a few hundred leads. So that's way too many. And that means that the majority of them are not going to fund you because you don't want them or they don't want you, but we don't know it at that specific moment yet. So one of the things that we see if you then look at the donors is something you might recognize. That is this sentence: we do not accept unsolicited proposals. I'm not sure if you ever seen it, but this is something that quite a few foundations have on the website. Or if you call them, that this is the answer that you're getting back. I see some faces that look like, hey, I've seen this before. So this is what you see a lot, and you see in this example from this foundation. I don't know the foundation by heart, to be honest, but that they do careful review and all of that. So the reason they put this on their website is just to make sure that they don't get too many applications. Accepting an application and reading it and evaluating it and then get back to you with what they think about it costs a lot of time and resources. Many of these foundations, they don't have all of that manpower in place. So instead they say, don't come to us with your proposal. And what you could do if you see this is decide not to submit a proposal, because that's what it says. And I think that's a good decision. But it doesn't mean that you should not pursue this foundation. And actually, the foundations that have this on the website are probably very interesting leads for you. And why is that? Because many nonprofits that see this decide to go for a foundation that does not have this on the website, or maybe has like a call for proposal listed on the website, and they pursue those types because it feels safe. It says you can submit a proposal by April 1st. So what do? They don't participate in this webinar, but instead they're typing proposals. And why? Because it feels like they are in a better position to get funding. The opposite is true. If you do that, you have a success rate of less than 5%. If you actually start engaging with these foundations, you would probably end up with a success rate of 40–50%. So what do we need to do is get on the radar of these foundations. Well, people that have worked with us before, they recognize this model. This is something we keep on mentioning and explaining. So it's a fundraising funnel that we try to build here. And the last two steps are getting funding and maintenance of the funding relationship. And this is something that these foundations that I was just talking about, these nonprofits that I was just talking about, are doing. They are scanning the websites for opportunities, and they're starting to write proposals and press send, and then they wait. So it's a lot of pressure to write proposals, and then, often they get a no, and sometimes they're lucky and they get a yes. They build fundraising strategies around it. number of proposals being submitted per year, a certain success rate that we expect, a value of the proposals being submitted, and then we hope that we're going to raise the funding that our organization needs. I've worked with organizations where we had strategies like this. It feels like you're in a very secure position, because the harder you work, the more chances of getting funding you have. The opposite is actually true, because you cannot steer anything. We cannot steer if what the competition is going to do. We cannot steer if a foundation is going to publish a call for a proposal or not. All of these things we have no influence on. So instead, or additionally actually to this, you need to add 3 steps. That's the blue part of this pyramid. The donor research, Emilie already explained. So we need to find opportunities. But in this list, we need to exclude as many foundations as we get. So based on, and I will show you, I'll give you some tips afterwards, but based on the funding history, for example, we try to exclude as many foundations as we can. If we don't have access to them, if we don't have any network with them, if they've never heard of us, we've never heard of them, it's going to be a challenge. Not impossible, but a challenge. So we want to reduce the list as much as we can. And then we do the initial outreach. And initial outreach sounds very heavy or very, very simple. It depends a bit on how you see it. Can be a LinkedIn invitation, can be just calling the general phone number of the foundation. If you do that, you won't be successful. What we need to do is make sure that we are being seen by them before we actually do the initial outreach. And that doesn't mean that you as an organization need to be seen by the whole population of the United States. That's not needed. The only thing we need to do is the 2 or 3 decision makers at these foundations, they need to know about us. So we need to make sure that we're seen at a conference where they go, or that an article with our CEO is being published in a magazine that they read, or that we participate in a LinkedIn discussion that they are following, for example. Those types of things. So we try to do that. That takes time, that takes research, it takes energy to do all of that, but we need to make sure that if we send an email to them or give them a phone call, or we go and meet with them at a conference, that there's a high chance that they're going to be interested in actually talking to us. And Americans are always very polite. That's something you are going to, so even if you call them or you go to a conference, they are going to well, either be very polite and say that they don't have time to talk to you in a very nice way, so you feel very positive, or they are going to sit together with you for half an hour, and they will be positive as well. We organize quite a few roadshows, and we take European organizations to the US to actually meet with clients. And maybe Emilie, you can say something on how these meetings normally end.
Yeah, I like to call the American reaction the cheerleading reaction. They tend to be extremely polite. They just simply don't want to tell you no right off the bat, whereas I think that is typically a much the default for Dutch people. And so Americans will always say, oh, that's lovely. They might even say, like, that's a lovely, very interesting proposal, without having any intention or having really made up their minds yet about whether or not they'll fund you. So just keep that in mind. Americans are just being very polite. And I will also add to that it's good in order to build relationships. It's good to get, a little bit on their side and do like them. I think that usually helps, meaning you'll want to be very express lots of gratitude, be very polite, a little bit more than maybe you're naturally used to. I do believe that helps to get them on your side just a little bit more. Definitely. Yeah. So yeah, what will happen is if you don't listen very well, you have these meetings, you have all these dollar signs in your eyes, and you think that all your financial problems are gone. And then you don't get the result that you were expecting after these meetings, and you're going to doubt yourself. But this is
what every organization is facing. But if you're well prepared and you know who you're talking to and what you're talking about, and you talk to the right people at the right time, actually what they're trying to say is positive. So that's good. So that's what we try to achieve. And then the relationship building starts. So and that's something we also recommend you to do in Europe or in Asia or in Africa. In the US is slightly different. We sometimes send a birthday card if some relation of us has a birthday and we know about it, or a cake or flowers or those types of things. Don't do that in the US. That's not really appreciated so much. The opposite might happen, but it is important that you engage with the funder on a regular basis. And Americans are themselves quite active in that. So if you, as a non-American organization, try to enter this market, keep in mind that you probably have to pursue them more than you feel comfortable with. It's or that you're used to, at least, because American organizations they're on top of this, and you're competing with them. So don't mind reaching out to your funder on a very regular basis. And when the level of trust is being built, that's the moment to submit a proposal. And you will see that you're not competing with the others. And that means you don't have between 1 and 5% of success rate, where you're in this category that you're actually invited to submit a proposal. And that's what you just saw in this sentence. So no problem if you see we do not accept unsolicited proposals. Make sure that you focus on the blue steps first and make sure you get invited. That's it. And then you're there. If somewhere in the process you have the feeling it's not working, okay, focus somewhere else. Don't waste your time on things that are not working, but yeah, plenty of ways to make sure that you are getting invited to submit a proposal. This can take a long time. We always say, keep in mind, it can take 2 years before the foundation is at the level that they're going to fund you, if they have never heard of you and you have never heard of them before. So from that initial cold situation up to the warm relationship, it can take 2 years. With plenty of experiences where this went a lot quicker than that. There are also cases where it took longer than this. So, but if you take 2 years as an average, you're on the safe side. So that's what we recommend you to do. Good. So there are a few tips that tools you can use, and this is perhaps the most boring, but if you get it, the most exciting tool there is. The 990 form. Have you ever heard of it? I see a few yeses and a few no's and a few doubting, like, what is this? Okay. A 990 form is the text form that foundations have to fill in and publish. And this is where the transparency comes in. So all foundations in the US, and this is an example of the Ford Foundation, every year they fill in their tax forms. And sometimes they're only like 20, 30 pages. And there are cases of 1,600 pages of information every year published by this foundation to the IRS, the tax authority of the US. And this is filled in by them and published by them. And it's accessible to you. So this Foundation Center database, for example, is built around this data. What do? Every year they seek for these 100,000 tax forms, and they take the information out and put it in the database. So there are many people that are just typing in this information. And that means this is a lot of information. I'm just going to show you a few things. This is from the Ford Foundation, as you can see. And there's a lot more in this than I can show you now. But and what I would like to offer you is, if you're interested in a certain foundation, send me a message afterwards or here in the chats, which foundation you're interested in, and we're going to make sure you get the 990 form. You can read it yourself. Seems boring when you get it, but it's actually quite exciting, because you will see a few things. And like in this case, you let me zoom in a little bit, is this first zero. that you see here. The contribution, gifts and grants that this foundation got is 0. And that is very informative because this means this is not a fundraising foundation. There are many fundraising foundations as well. And that means that if you approach them in a completely different style because you know that not only they want to achieve impact, but they also have to do their own fundraising to some degree. You know, some do full fundraising, and some they do fundraising to donate to others, and some do it to complement to reserves that they have. In the case of the Ford Foundation, they have reserves, they have investments, and the revenue they invest in the grant giving policies. And that means that the way you can approach them is completely different. So it's not about making sure that they can also do fundraising. In this case, if you approach the Ford Foundation, impact probably matters more than visibility, for example. Long-term effects probably matter more than short-term effects. That's what you get out of this number 0. And in the case of the Ford Foundation, if you actually go to their website, I posted recently a video on my LinkedIn, you might have seen it, but they, for example, have as a policy, you need to include a minimum of 25% of overhead in your projects, a minimum. If you put in less, they will call you and say, this is not enough overhead. You need at least 25%. You can also put in 40%, 50% if you think that is needed, but at least 25%. And they can afford it because they have the resources. That's just the first figure that we see. I'm not going to go through all the figures because there are thousands of them in their report. This is also interesting. All the key stuff. We are always thinking about who should we approach, who are the decision makers. It's being published, and this continues for pages in the case of the Ford Foundation. All of the senior staff are mentioned here. All the companies that they work with, you know, where they outsource the ICT to, the security to, all of them are listed here, and the amounts are there as well. So in this case, we know that the chief investment officer is Erik Topstad. Okay, that's nice. We know the address. Well, that's of course the foundation address. We also know that this Erik is making 2.5 million per year. Well, that's not relevant in your fundraising, but those are fun facts that you can just get out of these things. He makes, you know, double the amount as the president of the foundation. So investment is really important because if they don't do their investments right, they don't generate the money that they need. And those types of things we can get out of these 990 forms. Also, they list all of the projects and all of the activities that they fund. So this also in the case of the Ford Foundation, this goes on for pages, 40, 50, 60 pages at least, of all kinds of grants that they've given. So you see small grants, you see big grants, you see, and they have to report to the IRS what is being used for. This is great input because for 2 reasons. One is it helps you to see a trend. So sometimes you hear these organizations that get like $1 million from the Ford Foundation, and you also need $1 million. So you go to the Ford Foundation and you ask for $1 million and they say no. So what went wrong? Well, it might be that this first foundation, they didn't get the million straight away, but they started with 100,000 grants. That was successful, then the 250,000, then 500,000, then $1 million. If you see that trend, you can follow that trend. You go with a very small proposition first, build trust, build experience with each other, and grow gradually. So if you see that happening with the foundation, and you can just download the 990 forms also from the previous years, you can see the actual trends per topic and per recipient. What is also interesting is if we're going to talk to them, the language that we want to use. So if, for example, we have a project in education, and we see that in the 990 words, they don't use the word education, but they use something else, capacity building. We're not going to talk about education anymore. If we have marketing materials that we want to use, we get rid of that word. Why? Because they don't use it. They probably have a reason for that. So let's use their wording and try to connect because of that. And that's where you will stand out over all the others that are still using the words that they are not using. And all of that you can find in these 990 forms. Well, tons of more information that you can find here, but I'm happy to show you more at a later stage if you are interested. Other thing that I want to mention to you is the 501c3. I'm not sure if you, 990 was already a lot of jargon. The 501c3 is maybe even more jargon. 501c3 is the American equivalent of the charity status. So what do you see if you do a donor mapping and you reach out to funders and you look at their website? You will see the sentence, "We only fund American organizations with a 501c3. Well, you are non-American based nonprofits, so you might come to the conclusion, okay, this is not going to work for us. Could be. The big question is, why do they publish there? Why do they publish on their website that they only fund American organizations? Because there might be different reasons, and with some we can deal with and some we just have to accept. If the reason is trust, they know in America, if they, for example, give money to an American NGO and they don't deliver, they can go to the American court and claim back the money. If they give it to a Dutch or a Belgium or an African organization and you don't deliver, you take the money and you disappear. Which court can they go to? Yeah, to the US court, but you know, it's they can never get your money back. So it's easier for them from a trust level to donate to American organizations. If that's the case, well, the relationship building is probably already is dealing with that issue. Might be for practical reasons, might be for that they're so proud of America kind of reasons. All of these reasons we can, in the relationship building, deal with. There's one reason that we cannot deal with, and that's the tax reason. So it might be that they only want to give to a 501c3 because then the gift is tax deductible. So they give you $1 million and they can, you know, go to the IRS and say, we donated $1 million to a 501c3, so we can get some of our taxes back. If that's the case, well, there are a few ways in how you can deal with it. The ultimate is setting up a 501c3. So your own foundation in the US. And that's something I've personally done twice. And it takes a lot of time and resources. But when it's there, it's there. You know, it's in the two cases where I was working for a 501c3 that was related to a European NGO. We were in both cases successful in fundraising. Funnily enough, in both cases, none of the funding went through the 501c3. It went straight away to the European organization. In other words, if we would have talked to the funder first, why do you need a 501c3? We would have figured out that it was a trust issue more than a tax reason. We would never have decided to set up the 501c3 because it's very expensive, very costly, it takes a lot of time and energy, and you can never get rid of it because it's independent formally. In case there would have been a funder that says, no, I need a 501c3, I could have gone to these types of organizations. The Netherlands America Foundation, for Dutch organizations, that's a good alternative, or for European foundations, the King Boudewijn Foundation exists. It's a Belgian, from origin, a Belgian foundation. What they do is they set up friend of, and then at your organization name, entities under their 501c3. So practically it means they accept the funding from the Ford Foundation on behalf of you. They have the 501c3, Ford Foundation can go to the IRS and get some of the taxes back. They then donate it to you in Europe. In return, they want a small percentage of this, and these are really small percentages, and a setup fee. And also the setup fee, it's a few hundred to maybe $1,500 or so. Depends a bit on which organization you use. That's it. It takes half a day to get it arranged. Yeah. So if you see we only give to American organizations, don't freak out. It's still a good opportunity. And if we cannot fix it, we can fix it. That's the clue. What I want to say today to you.
One more addition I'll make is that besides the two alternatives that Han just mentioned, the NAF and the King Boudewijn Foundation, there is another option to become a charity or 501c3 equivalent organization. And so it's another US organization that offers the service of vetting your organization and giving you a certain sort of seal of approval that certifies that you are a 501c3 equivalent. So you are considered like an American 501c3. You're still your own organization and everything. You just sort of get like a stamp of approval. In some cases, for some donors, that can also be what they accept. So it's worth exploring.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Emilie. Good. So those are a few of the tips and tricks that we wanted to share with you today. That means we now go into the final part of today's session, and that's giving the floor to you in case you have any questions or issues that you would like to discuss. If you prefer one-on-one, then let us know and we will call you afterwards. But if you want to do a plenary, that's nice. If you prefer one-on-one, you can just send Emilie or me an email or give us a call, but email is probably easiest. So it's first name, Han or Emilie at hvfc-international.com. Good. So thank you for listening so patiently. And I open up the floor to you in case you have questions. Leslie, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks very much, Han, Emilie. Really interesting. And I'm sort of looking to see what the similarities are and the differences between the approach we would have for European foundations and for the foundations in the States. So I think you did mention some, like, I think with American foundations, they maybe expect more stewardship, more relationship building. But what would you say are the main differences? I know that there's many foundations, but if you look at it generally, what would you say the differences between the foundations from the States and from Europe?
Well, personally, and maybe Emilie wants to add something to it. I think personally is that I like the American openness. That's so as a fundraiser, I love it because it's relatively easy to start talking to a funder, and they're open and they listen and they're pleasant in that. It's also challenging because the Dutch directness means sometimes that they just don't want to talk to you, and they don't pick up the phone or they don't even reply to your email, and that's hard, and but maybe it saves you quite a lot of time. That's definitely an issue. But I would say the connections are easier. Also, one other thing that I think about is that I don't know if that goes for all American foundations, that's maybe too much, but at least of some foundations that I've experienced with, is that they appreciate the local context that NGOs can bring to them. They're the ones that I'm thinking about right now. They knew that they had a limited view of what actually was going on in the projects that they were funding. And that was one of the reasons that they were very interested in talking, because they get input from their partner organizations, but also that is a very biased view of what's actually going on. And so when I was working for INGOs or afterwards with clients of us, was talking to funders, they really appreciate, and they ask tons of questions about what's really going on. And that's also something that's not the topic of today, what you will see with the US government, for example. You know, if you're working for a mission of the US government, in many cases, you're not allowed to leave the compound for security reasons. So if you then have to decide on what projects need priority in your policy, you do depend on conversations with NGOs that tell you what is actually happening on the ground, and it can tell you where the priorities are, because you need that information. And yeah, in that sense, they're like sponsors almost. Like tell us more, share us more, and there's the opportunity for relationship building also. It's a different type of relationship building than in Europe, maybe, or maybe it's not that extreme, but it's a different nuance. A lot, if you can feed them with content and experiences, then they're very open to that. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think I'll underline the idea of just the cultural difference, which kind of shows up in different ways in the way you build relationships with these donors, in the issues that they're interested in. For example, Han touched on it, but try to be at the very least aware of what is going on in American, let's say, society. Or, for example, in terms of new big picture American legislation. For example, Congress just passed the Inflation Reduction Act last year, and it has huge amounts of money for example, environmental issues, including, for example, for more battery-driven cars. And so those are funds that are going to be spent in the United States, but it does, just the fact that that topic is being funded means that there are implications and certain effects on the giving by foundations, or some of the money that foundations may be distributing may originally come from US foundation government sources. So that's where some of the priorities are being set. So again, my point is to say, just be aware of what's going on in the country, just like you would with European funders.
Yeah. And one small addition that is actual today in the Netherlands. We had elections yesterday. I had a few calls today earlier, and all of the calls were discussing the elections and what did you vote, and all of the that's. I've made that mistake in the US a few times, where I was discussing politics in these types of meetings, and that was not really appreciated. Yeah, it's very sensitive. It's more sensitive than in the Netherlands, at least. Yeah. Thanks, Blanca. Any more questions? Everyone is super silent. Great. Well, then it's also 4. So thank you so much for the last hour, and thank you so much for taking the time to listen to Emilie and I. And yeah, like mentioned, if you have any follow-up questions or things you would like to discuss, we're here. And also with regards to the 990 form, if you're interested in one specific donor, just send us a message, and I will make sure you get the report. And if you want to read it together with us, I'm here to go through it together with you and see what is relevant and what is not relevant. But you would get hopefully inspired as I do. So thank you so much for today, and I hope to see you soon again.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you.